Shalom, my good friends. Outside the land of Israel, they will be reading the Parashat of Balak. Balak, the enemy of Israel, the hater of Israel, is looking for a way how to destroy the Jewish people who are coming towards him, knowing that the Jewish people was already the chosen nation of God. So, since he cannot defeat the Jewish people with his army, especially after the Jewish people have demolished the Emori, who used to be a very, very big enemy, a big an enemy even of Balak, and yet he was defeated to total destruction by the Jewish people. So Balak worried very much. He knows he cannot fight the Jewish people face to face, so he's looking for other ways. In his time there was a man who was very powerful. His name was Bilam. Our sages said that God gave him the power of prophecy. So great was his power that apparently he was even more powerful than Moses, than Moshe Rabbeinu. And his power was in his mouth. He could curse and destroy. Apparently he could also give a blessing, and the blessing will be upon the people who are blessed. But Balak, rather than asking Bilam to bless him, to be saved from the threat of the Jewish people, he preferred to ask Bilam to curse the Jewish people and to bring them to some kind of destruction, God forbid. However, as the Torah tells us very clearly, Bilam, despite the fact that he was a big hater of the Jewish people, an anti-Semite by creation, nevertheless he admitted that he cannot do much unless if he was given permission by God. He even said to Balak and his messengers that he is willing to go with them and to try, but whatever God will put in his mouth, that's what he can say. Which brings to the open a very great question. If he knows God, he knows that God is the God of Israel. So how come he's looking for cursing? How can he get permission from God to curse the Jewish people? But Bilam hoped, when someone hates very much, so he's attached to any kind of possibility. He says, maybe God will permit me to curse them, which is illogical. And yet, because he was so engrossed with his hatred, he was not thinking about the result of all this. He went ahead. Our sages said that he even was about to curse them, and God practically stopped his mouth, clogged his mouth from saying a curse, and instead only a blessing came out from his mouth. Amazing. If we look upon all this, this happened 3,300 years ago. And it seems to be very familiar. We still see the same things happening these days. We are again surrounded by enemies. Even in the state of Israel, which finally is a beginning of redemption of the Jewish people after 2,000 years of persecutions and exile. Nevertheless, the hatred of the nations did not stop. It still goes on with all its poison, all its injustice. Unbelievable. And the question that we raise is, don't they know by now that since the Jewish people survived all the persecutions for thousands of years, and finally now we have again our land of Israel, don't the nations who hate us, don't they think that they cannot defeat us? I mean, apparently, it is the proof that there is a God, and God exists, and God favors the Jewish people. That does not mean that the Jewish people does not suffer. Of course, we suffered more than any other nation. It is possible because of our sins, or it is possible that because we are the closer to God. The closer you are to God, the more difficult it might be. Our sages said in the Talmud, HaKadosh Baruch Hu medakdek im hatzaddikim kechut hasa'ara. God is stricter with the righteous more than the evil one, which apparently is not logical. With the righteous, he should be maybe more magnanimous. Oh no, quite the contrary. God is more strict. Why? Because to be close to God, you have to be as pure as possible. And that's the reason why we have to suffer, and that's why we suffered exile and persecutions and destructions. But we are still here, alive and strong, with our faith of Judaism. The question is upon the nations. Is it not enough what they have done to us for so many generations? Why do they continue? There is a possibility to say that they have no choice. They know the truth, but they can't stop their hatred. I did hear this from a certain non-Jewish man who admitted that he loves Israel, but at the same time he cannot bring himself into saying something that is just and positive. He knows that justice and the truth is with Israel. At the same time, something is holding him back. In fact, what he revealed to me, by the way, that was the point exactly which made him think about joining and converting to Judaism. But that's another story. The theme of today is a very important one. To my opinion, we have a great obligation. The great obligation is that we have to open our eyes to see what? I am going to defy logic by saying to see God. Can we see God? Apparently, Rambam in his book is saying that not only we cannot see God, because he doesn't have a shape that we have, nor a human body, but we don't even have the permission to fathom, to even think and imagine God in any kind of form. So what am I saying then? That we are under the obligation to see God every day. In Pirkei Avot, in the book of the Fathers, it says, Akavya ben Mahalal el Omer, histakel bishlosha devarim. He says, ponder and look upon three things. Ve'en ataba lidei avera, and you will not bring yourself into sin. When we learn Pirkei Avot, we did discuss this. But that, he says, there are three things that one should ponder about, and this way to avoid falling into sin. But that's about sins. What I am saying is that we are under the obligation to observe, to look, to gaze at the many things that are created in this world, that practically you could see God. Seeing Him, that means to feel Him, to see His presence, to feel it so much as if you see Him as it is. Let me give you an example. I know it's a thought that is apparently beyond logic. But you see, the Torah says, shalosh regalim bashana yera'e kol zechurecha. 3 times a year, the Jewish people, long time ago when we had the temple, they were under the obligation to come to Jerusalem. And what does it say? Yera'e kol zechurecha. Let them see, let them be seen, every male Jew, and to see the face of God. How can we see the face of God? Does God have a face? But again, as we said, they came to Jerusalem and they were on such a level that they felt so much the presence of God as if they saw Him. Now let me go further into this idea. There is one concept that we call the fear of God. In Hebrew we call it Yirat Hashem. Yirat means the fear of God. But the word Yirah, by the way, the fear has also another Hebrew name, Pachad, terror or fear. But what we have to understand is that Yirah is also the fear of God or the fear of heaven, but it is derived from the word re'iyah, lir'ot, to see. It brought me to think, possibly, that one, by being a person who observes and looks upon everything in the world that seems to be worthy of observation, and that observation will lead you to believe so much in God as if you see Him. And that's why Yir'ah, the word fear of God, is in fact the same word as Re'iyah, to see. And that brings the idea of a great obligation that every Jew and every human being should have every day, not only the 3 times to ponder, to avoid sin, as Akavia ben Malal said. That's about the sin. Which are they? Remember what they are. 3 things that one should observe, and that they are, in order to avoid sin, Da me'ayin bata, you have to, number 1 is to know where you came from. You came from a fetid drop, tipa serucha. The second thing, lifnei vele'an ata holech, where are you going at the end of your life? Well, limkom afarim maveto le'a, to the grave where there is only worms and dust. And finally, the third thing is lifnei mi ata omed lifnei melech malchei hamelachim hakadosh baruch, before whom you are going to stand after death, before the Almighty. So Akabia ben Ma'alal says, if you observe those 3 things and you ponder upon them, you might be able to avoid falling into a sin. But what I am saying is another kind of philosophy, that there is a possibility to see God every day. All you have to do is to be a person who observes. Let me give you an example. We all know about Rabbi Akiva, the great master of all the generations. You know, when he was 4 years of age, quite advanced in age, he was still an ignoramus, Ama Aretz. He was very intelligent, as his wife-to-be, Rachel, the daughter of Kalba Sabua, the rich man of Jerusalem, the only daughter that he had. She fell in love with Akiva, but she fell in love with his intellect, his natural intellect. She was walking with him every day while he was just a shepherd of his master, of his boss, Kalba Sabua. But she liked his company because she saw in him that he was greatly intelligent. And then she asked him, Akiva, she said, your mind is extraordinary, you should delve into Torah. So his answer was, I never did, and I cannot start now. I am 4 years of age. Can I start now learning the Torah? The Torah requires a mind. She told him, but you are very clever, you are very intelligent. You could. Well, he belittled that, perhaps. He went on his way one day, and then suddenly he saw a certain phenomenon. He saw that from the rock was dripping, some water was dripping, drop by drop, and falling on another hard surface of marble, a rock of marble, falling upon it. It looks like it has happened this way for many generations, maybe from the time of the world was created, and those drops were falling on the same spot, and they created a hole into such a very hard surface. Water is very, very smooth, right? And yet, day by day, the same drops falling on the same surface were capable of creating a hole into the marble. Rabbi Akiva saw that. He stood and he observed. And he was thinking, he says, if water, which is the softest element, was able to create such a hole in the hardest of all surfaces, then maybe Rachel was right, that even though I am 4 years of age, but it's possible for me that the Torah would penetrate my spirit. Let me go and start learning. He humbled himself to go to a class of Torah in which only very youngsters were there, and he was old. He submitted himself to this kind of humiliation. For 7 years he did not open his mouth. When he opened finally his mouth, it was a mouth that could never stop. That's how the Jewish people gained Rabbi Akiva for all the generations. What was that gave us such a gift to have a man like this? The fact that he stood in the same place and observed. He saw something that everybody saw, but nobody else stood to observe and to think what it means except Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva became Rabbi Akiva, the teacher of all the generations of the Jewish people. Why? Because he looked and observed. This is only one example. We can look upon every kind of thing that seems to be extraordinary. And we look upon things and we go by, like if we say, have seen nothing. But if we stand and look upon everything and ask how it came to be, how is it that a child is born? I mean, every day people are born the same way. Well, you give this gift to nature. There must be something behind it. If one thinks and stands to observe everything in creation, it's impossible for him to deny the existence of God. It means he will finally see God. The same Rabbi Akiva, he is the one who taught us something extraordinary. He lived 1900 years ago. And it is written in Midrash Rabbah, Shira Shirim Rabbah. Rabbi Akiva says, he pointed at the Kotel HaMa'aravi, the western wall, that was the last vestige, the remnant of the temple, which almost close to his time it was destroyed. And when he saw the wall, he says, this wall will never be destroyed. Why? Because the divine presence rests there. Now, let's ask ourselves. Today we can go to the western wall and look at it and pray there. Do we stand and observe the wall and say, wait a minute, but 2000 years ago Rabbi Akiva said that this wall will never be destroyed. Let us judge from history. Close to 2,000 years ago, when the temple was destroyed, that wall remained. And then came Adrianus, Caesar, a big anti-Semite. And he destroyed everything. He even plowed out Jerusalem, and he gave it a name, Palestine, Palestina. And yet he did not think that he should destroy this wall, which became a center of prayer of all the tears of Israel of all the generations. Why? He destroyed everything else. Well, Rabbi Akiva says this wall cannot be destroyed because the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is resting there. Let's go further. The time of the Crusades. The time of the Crusaders. They destroyed everything that was Jewish that was in front of them. But they did not destroy the wall. Rabbi Akiva said it will not be destroyed. Go further into the time, the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, when they covered the wall with garbage. Instead, they should have destroyed it. They didn't. Why? Rabbi Akiva said, it will not be destroyed, for the Shekhinah is there. Come, now we arrive to our time. Before the war of the 6 Days War, what happened? We heard that in Jordan, Hussein, the king of Jordan, allowed his army to destroy everything that was Jewish. They destroyed magnificent synagogues, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Eliyahu Navi, and others. But they had in front of them was the wall, the western wall, Kotel HaMa'aravi, where they saw Jews still hiding and coming and huddling there to pray to God. Why, if he destroyed everything else, why didn't he destroy the wall? Rabbi Akiva said, this wall cannot be destroyed. Well, it doesn't take much intelligence to observe that. Go to the Kotel and see it. How is it possible that it's still standing? There is a God. How do I know that there is a God? Because I am a person who observes. I see how come Rabbi Akiva was able to say those words long time ago, taking the responsibility of saying such a thing, which could have been proven to be untrue. And yet he said it. Our sages said, Chacham adif min navi. A sage is even better, is favored by God than even the prophet. Here we see a sage, one of the greatest sages of Israel of all time, was proven to be more than a prophet. If that does not prove the existence of God behind this, then I don't know what will prove it. And the examples, no end. And to prove that to myself, I found in the Talmud in Masechet Rosh Hashanah on page 3. You'll find there that it says openly that which we consider yir'ah, vayir'u, they were afraid, it means vayir'u, it means they saw. It's talking there about the death of Aharon. And then Melech Arad, the king of Arad, came to attack the Jewish people. Why? Because he heard that Aharon HaKohen has died, and automatically the cloud of glory disappeared, which were the source of protection of the Jewish people. Now there is no more protection to the Jewish people. He can come and attack us. The Jewish people also got scared. Al tikre vayireu ela vayir'u, or vayir'u and vayireu. Amazing that the word yir'ah was given in the vernacular of the Hebrew vernacular as fear, but it means also lir'ot, to see. I'll give you another example. When the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt and they finally saw the tremendous miracle of the splitting of the sea, it says in the Torah, Vayar Yisrael et hayad hagedola, and the Jewish people saw the great hand of God. ויראו השם את השם ויאמינו בהשם משה עבדו. And then they feared God and they believed in him, and that Moshe was only his messenger or his slave, his servant. What does it mean? That they have seen and therefore they acquire the great fear. Fear, not the way we understand it, like you fear a lion or you fear something that is dangerous. The fear is the awesomeness of God. It was a great level. Our sages said that the people who came out from Mitzrayim, when after the splitting of the sea, they were considered each one of them like a prophet. This teaches us something very important, that we have to learn to look upon things. What is it that makes them, and how come it is? And this way we will be able to find out God and to see Him. Of course, it's a high level. It requires a high level of spirituality, but it's worth it. Now when we see that, let's go back to the Parashat of Balak. What was that? Bil'am wanted to curse the Jewish people. Instead, he blessed them. In his blessing, he says, Matovu alecha Yaakov. He admits that the tents of Jacob are the best in the world. And then he says, Am levadad ishkonu bagoyim lo yitchashav. This is a nation, he referred to the Jewish people, this is a nation which will always be by itself, cannot mingle with other nations. Ubagoyim lo yitchashav. It will not be, its number will not be considered a number among the nations. I want to explain that. It means that the Jewish people have no numbers. Today we have maybe 14 million Jews in the world. But watch how much noise they make in the world. I mean, the media is full of things regarding the Jewish people, right? Especially Israel. But he said that 3,300 years ago. This nation will always be by itself. Are we here today to implement what Bil'am said or no? Of course. We are different than all the nations. We don't eat what they eat. Talking about religious Jews, of course. And we are hated by the whole world. That means we are different. Give me one single reason for which it is just to hate us. What have we done? We brought benefit to the world, no end in every generation. And yet they hate us. And they committed us. They submitted us to so many things. Horrors, atrocities. And yet we are here still today with the same philosophy. We are different. Very simple. We have been chosen by God to remind the world of God. And the world knows that very well. But that hatred, they cannot stop it. It is possible, in accordance with the prophecies, that soon, when the final redemption will come, when the temple will be restored, and when finally King Messiah will come, v'nikbetzu kol ha'amim, the prophet says that all the nations will come around the Jewish people. And then, finally, the verse, the ultimate verse, will come to be. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. Then, the supremacy of God will be upon the whole world. ביום ההוא, on that day, the name of God will be only one. No more different religions. All the religions will recognize the oneness of God, no other religion. That's what will happen. It appears according to what we see. If we observe, that's what's going to happen. Let's hope it will happen in our life. All we want is peace with the nations. All we want is to be understood and to be respected as the people who have been chosen by God. That does not mean that we have to become arrogant? God forbid. Oh no. But at the same time, we represent God in the world. And I'm going to tell you the truth. I have seen it many times, that even non-Jews know that truth. Like Bilam. Bilam knew the truth. And yet, he wanted to curse the Jewish people. This is the force of Tum'ah, a force of Satan. Satan also knows that God is God, and yet he does things against God. Perhaps that's his mission in life. Perhaps the fact that the nations hate us, it's the will of God to keep us separated. There are many reasons for all things that are. All we need is to stand up and observe. Shabbat Shalom.